Run, the woman rasped, her lips split and swollen, her wrists raw where the chain bit into skin. You didn't see me. Go home. Lily Morgan was 8 years old. She was 43 pounds soaking wet. She had a juice box in her backpack and a missing dog she hadn't found yet. She looked at the woman bleeding against the bark of that pine tree, and she did the only thing that made sense to her. She stayed. Nobody would understand what happened next. Not the sheriff, not the town, and certainly not the 700 men who came roaring into Pine Creek 3 days later with fire in their engines and grief in their eyes. If this story already has your heart beating faster, you are exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to this channel right now, hit that bell so you never miss a story like this one. Drop your city in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to that forest. The dog's name was Biscuit, and he had been missing since just after noon. Lily had called for him at the back fence, at the creek edge, through the gap in the Hendersons' old hedgerow. She had shaken his leash and offered the handful of treats she kept in the zip pocket of her yellow backpack. Nothing. So she went into the trees the way her grandmother had told her not to, because Biscuit was afraid of the dark, and she knew he was out there somewhere, sitting in a patch of shadow and shaking, waiting for someone to come find him. Her grandmother, Ruth Morgan, was 67 years old and didn't move as fast as she used to. Lily knew that, so she didn't tell her where she was going. That part she would regret later. Not because of what happened to her, but because of what it did to Ruth's face when she found out. The woods outside Pine Creek were thick in August. The ground was dry, cracked in the open places, soft and muddy where the trees closed in and the sun couldn't get through. Lily followed the sound of the creek, figuring Biscuit would follow water the way he always did at the park, stopping every 3 feet to drink from puddles, even when his bowl was full at home. She had gone maybe a quarter mile when she heard something that wasn't the water and wasn't the wind. It was low, almost nothing, like the sound a person makes when they're trying not to make any sound at all. Lily stopped walking. She held her breath. It came again, a thin, ragged exhale, followed by something that might have been a word, or might have been just air moving through a throat that hurt too much to speak clearly. Most kids would have run. She understood that later, when adults kept saying it to her, shaking their heads, using that word, brave, like it explained something. But bravery wasn't what she felt, standing in those trees, listening to a woman trying to breathe. What she felt was simpler than that. She felt like someone needed help, and she was the only one there to give it. She pushed through a stand of young pines and stepped into a small clearing she hadn't known was there. The woman was chained to a tree, not tied, chained, an actual heavy chain, the kind you'd use to lock a gate or secure a trailer, wrapped twice around the trunk and closed at the woman's wrists with a padlock the size of Lily's fist. The woman was sitting with her back against the bark, her legs stretched out in front of her, her head dropped forward. She was wearing jeans and boots and a leather vest, black with patches on the back that Lily couldn't read from where she stood, and her dark hair was matted against the side of her face with something that had dried dark brown. Lily knew what dried blood looked like. She'd fallen off her bike enough times. She took one step forward, and the woman's head snapped up. Their eyes met. The woman's left eye was nearly swollen shut. Her lip was split in 2 places. There was a cut along her jawline that had crusted over but not healed, and her breathing was the kind of breathing Lily associated with the time she'd had pneumonia in 2nd grade. Careful, deliberate, like each breath was a negotiation. "Run," the woman said. Her voice was barely a sound. "You didn't see me. Go home." Lily didn't move. "How long have you been out here?" Lily asked. The woman blinked, like the question surprised her, like she'd expected the kid to bolt and hadn't prepared an answer for this. "Long enough," she said. "Are you cold?" The woman almost laughed at that. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the sound that falls out of a person when something hits them in a way they weren't expecting. "Kid, I have water, Lily said, already pulling her backpack off one shoulder, already unzipping the front pocket. She held out the water bottle, half full, room temperature, with a Hello Kitty sticker on the side that was starting to peel. You look like you need it more than me. The woman stared at the bottle. She stared at it the way people stare at things they stop believing in. Then she looked at Lily, really looked at her, the way adults sometimes did when they were trying to figure out if a child was for real. What's your name? The woman asked. Lily. Lily, the woman said it slowly, like she was tasting the word. How old are you? 8. How old are you? That almost laugh again. 34. That's not that old, Lily said, moving closer. She crouched down in front of the woman, holding the water bottle out. My grandma is 67, and she still runs the church rummage sale by herself. The woman took the bottle with both hands. She had to. The chain only gave her so much range. And she drank 3 long swallows without stopping. Then she pressed the cool plastic against the side of her face and closed her eye. Thank you, she said quietly. I'm going to call 911, Lily said. The woman's eye opened. No. You're chained to a tree. I know what I'm chained to. You're bleeding. Lily. The woman leaned forward as much as the chain would allow, which wasn't much. Her voice dropped. You don't know what kind of people did this to me. If you call 911 and they trace it back to you, if the wrong people find out a little girl found me. She stopped, looked away. Her jaw was working like she was fighting something back. I don't want you in the middle of this. I'm already in the middle of it, Lily said simply. I'm standing right here. The woman looked at her for a long moment. Her name, she said, was Savannah. She didn't give a last name. She said it the way people say things when they're leaving parts out on purpose. And Lily was 8, but she wasn't stupid. She nodded like she understood, because she did. Do you know who did this to you? Lily asked. Yes. Are they coming back? Savannah's mouth pressed into a line. I don't know, she said. That's the honest answer. I don't know. Lily pulled out her phone, an old smartphone her grandmother had given her, cracked screen, the kind that could still call 911 even without a plan, and she dialed before Savannah could say another word. Please don't, Savannah started, but Lily was already talking, calm and clear, the way her grandmother had taught her. Location, situation, urgency. She gave the dispatcher the name of the trail she'd come in on, the creek, the distance she'd walked. She described the chain. She described the blood. She said the woman was conscious and breathing, but needed help and to please hurry. When she hung up, Savannah was watching her with an expression Lily couldn't name at the time. She would learn the word for it later. Awe. But she was 8, and she just thought the woman looked like she was trying not to cry. You're going to be okay, Lily told her. I'm going to stay here until they come. You should go back to the trail. I'm not leaving you by yourself. Lily, I'm not, she said, and she sat down cross-legged on the ground in front of Savannah Cole and opened her backpack and took out the other half of the granola bar she'd been eating on the way in. And she waited. The deputies arrived 11 minutes later. 2 of them, cutting through the trees from the south, where the fire road ran, crashing through brush with their flashlights, cutting white arcs through the shade, even though it was the middle of the afternoon. Deputy Karen Walsh was first into the clearing, and she stopped so hard when she saw the chain that the deputy behind her almost ran into her back. Jesus, Walsh said under her breath. Then she saw the child sitting on the ground. Honey, Walsh said carefully, the way people talk to children near accident scenes, low and slow and deliberate. Did you call this in? Yes, ma'am, Lily said. Are you hurt? No, ma'am. Walsh looked from Lily to Savannah to the chain to the padlock, and Lily could see her processing all of it, running through some mental checklist that ended with a lot of questions none of them had answers to yet. We need bolt cutters, Savannah said. Her voice was stronger now, or maybe just more controlled. She was sitting up straighter. and she needs to go home. She's been here long enough. Walsh got on her radio. The second deputy, young, barely out of training by the look of him, stood at the edge of the clearing with his hand on his belt, scanning the trees. Lily noticed that. She noticed he kept looking at the trees. She didn't say anything about it then, but she remembered it later. "Ma'am," Walsh said, crouching in front of Savannah with her notepad open, "can you tell me your full name?" Savannah paused. Just for a beat, just long enough to be noticeable. "Savannah Cole." Walsh wrote it down. Her pen slowed. She wrote it again, or maybe underlined it. Lily couldn't see. Then she looked up. "Do you know a Mason Cole?" Something moved across Savannah's face. Fast, layered, complicated. Relief and fear happening at the same time. "He's my husband," she said. Walsh sat back on her heels. She turned and looked at the young deputy across the clearing, and he looked back at her, and they had an entire conversation without saying a word. Lily noticed that too. "What?" Lily asked. Walsh looked at her. "Nothing, sweetheart. You looked at each other like it was something." Walsh blinked. Then she almost smiled. "You're very observant for 8 years old." "My grandma says I see things people don't mean to show," Lily said. Walsh stood up. She put her hand on Lily's shoulder. "We're going to get your information, and then we're going to call your grandmother, okay? I'd like to take you home myself." "I haven't found my dog yet," Lily said. "I think," Walsh said carefully, "your dog is going to have to wait a little while." The bolt cutters came. The chain came off. A paramedic team arrived 6 minutes behind the bolt cutters and began working on Savannah with the focused, quiet efficiency of people who have learned to keep their faces neutral no matter what they're looking at. Savannah sat through all of it without making a sound. She answered questions in short, controlled sentences. She accepted water and the blood pressure cuff and the examination of her ribs without complaint. But when they moved to put her on the stretcher, she looked across the clearing at Lily. "Hey," she said. Lily looked up. "You didn't run," Savannah said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am." "Why not?" Lily thought about it. Actually thought about it, the way her teacher said you should before you answer. Taking a second to find the true thing instead of just the first thing. "Because you were still there," Lily said. "So I figured I should be too." Savannah Cole pressed her lips together and looked at the sky above the tree line for just a moment. Then she nodded once, and they loaded her onto the stretcher, and they carried her out of the woods. Ruth Morgan was standing in the kitchen when Walsh brought Lily home. She had her hands pressed flat on the counter, and her jaw was set the way it got when she was holding back something large. And she looked at Lily the way parents look at children who have just returned from somewhere they were never supposed to go. "I found a lady," Lily said by way of explanation. "She was chained to a tree." Ruth closed her eyes. "She's okay now," Lily added. "The ambulance came." Ruth opened her eyes and pulled Lily against her chest without a word, holding her the way grandmothers hold children they almost lost, which is different from all other kinds of holding. Walsh stood in the doorway and explained what she could, which wasn't much yet. She said Savannah Cole had been transported to Pine Creek General and was being evaluated. She said an investigation was underway. She said Ruth might be hearing from her department again in the next few days, given Lily's role as the person who'd called it in, and that she'd make sure the contact was handled with care. What Walsh didn't say, what Lily heard anyway, in the careful way the deputy chose her words, in the spaces between sentences, was that this was bigger than a woman chained to a tree in the woods. This was bigger than Pine Creek. This was something that had weight to it, the kind of weight that made people choose their words like they were picking their steps through ice. Lily sat at the kitchen table and ate the soup her grandmother put in front of her, and she thought about the way Walsh and the young deputy had looked at each other when Savannah said Mason Cole's name. She thought about that look all through dinner, all through the bath her grandmother insisted on, all through the 15 minutes of the book they read before bed. She was almost asleep when she heard the first motorcycle. Just one, distant, moving through town fast. Then another. Then she stopped counting because there were too many to count. The sound of them building and building until it wasn't individual engines anymore, but something continuous, a low, rolling thunder that had nothing to do with weather. She got out of bed and went to the window. The street below was empty, but the sound was coming from somewhere south of town, from the direction of the highway, and it was getting louder. She pressed her palm flat against the cold glass and listened. Her grandmother appeared in the doorway behind her. Ruth was wearing her robe and her reading glasses, and she stood very still, listening too. "Grandma," Lily said. "I hear it," Ruth said. "What is it?" Ruth looked at her. In the dark of the room, with the street light coming through the curtains, her grandmother's expression was unreadable. "Go back to bed, baby," Ruth said softly. "Whatever it is, it'll still be there in the morning." Lily went back to bed. She lay on her back with her eyes open and listened to the sound of 700 motorcycles pouring into Pine Creek. And she did not sleep for a very long time. By morning, the town had changed. Lily felt it before she saw it. The way you feel weather coming, a shift in the air, a change in the quality of sound. She came downstairs to find her grandmother standing at the front window with a mug of coffee pressed between both hands, looking out at the street with an expression Lily associated with church. Serious and still, and reaching for something. "What's happening?" Lily asked. Ruth turned. "Eat your breakfast first." "Grandma." Ruth looked at her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside from the window. The street was lined with motorcycles. Not a few, not a dozen. They stretched down both sides of Maple Street as far as Lily could see, parked nose to curb with the precision of something planned. Engines off, chrome catching the morning light. And there were men, and some women, standing in clusters on the sidewalk, wearing leather vests with patches on the back, talking in low voices, holding coffee cups from Myrna's diner, which meant Myrna's was open and doing business, and apparently serving 700 bikers like it was any other Thursday. "Are they here because of the lady?" Lily asked. "Because of Savannah?" Ruth set her coffee down very carefully on the windowsill. "Her husband called the hospital last night," Ruth said. "I don't know how he got our number. The deputy, Walsh, she called me this morning to let me know. She said he knows about you. Is that bad?" Ruth was quiet long enough that Lily started to feel the edges of something cold and formless sitting in her chest. "Ruth," said a voice from outside, low, carrying, with a quality of command that cut right through the glass. "I'd like to speak with your granddaughter." Ruth grabbed Lily's hand. Through the window, standing at the end of the front walk, was a man who took up more space than his actual size should have allowed. He was broad through the shoulders, with arms wrapped in ink from wrist to collar, and a gray beard trimmed close, and he was looking directly at the window with eyes that didn't move the way most people's eyes moved. He stood with his hands at his sides, not in his pockets, not crossed over his chest, just open, deliberate. Lily knew somehow that this was Mason Cole before anyone told her. "How did he know my name?" Lily asked. "My guess," Ruth said quietly, "is that his wife told him." "That's good, right? That means Savannah woke up. That means she's okay." Ruth looked at her granddaughter with something that mixed fear and wonder in proportions Lily couldn't quite separate. "That means she's okay," Ruth agreed. Outside, Mason Cole stood at the end of the walk and waited, patient as something that doesn't need to ask twice. And behind him, up and down Maple Street, 700 people waited with him. Lily finished her breakfast. Her grandmother watched her eat it, and Lily knew Ruth was deciding something, turning it over, putting it down and picking it up again. Ruth Morgan was not a woman who moved through decisions quickly. She was a woman who had learned that most mistakes came from moving too fast, from letting feeling outrun thinking, and she applied this principle to every significant moment of her life. But she also had not raised Lily to be a child who hid from things. When Lily's bowl was empty, Ruth washed it and dried her hands on the dish towel and said, "Put your shoes on." They walked out together, Ruth's hand firm around Lily's. into the morning air that smelled like coffee and exhaust and pine from the tree line at the edge of town. The people on the sidewalk went quiet as they came down the walk. Not threatening, not aggressive, just quiet, and the quiet spread outward in a wave. Mason Cole did not come toward them. He let them come to him. Lily registered that and filed it somewhere. Close up, he was bigger and also somehow different than the window had suggested. The eyes that had looked so flat and unreadable from behind glass were, up close, something else entirely. Red at the edges, dry the way eyes get when someone has not slept and has been crying and won't let themselves do either anymore. He looked at Lily, really looked at her, the full weight of his attention, the way only very serious people looked at children, not through them or over them, but directly at them, like they deserved to be seen. "My wife told me," he said, "that you sat on the ground in front of her and waited, that you called for help and then sat back down so she wouldn't be alone while she waited for it." "She looked scared," Lily said. "I didn't want her to be by herself." Mason Cole's jaw tightened. It was subtle, only the slight movement of muscle beneath the beard, but Lily saw it. "She also told me," he said, "that you offered her your water before you even asked her name." Lily shrugged. "She needed it more than me." Mason looked at her for another moment. Then he straightened up and looked at Ruth. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, "I'm Mason Cole. I'm sorry that your granddaughter was put in a position where she needed to be as brave as she was. That's not something a child should have to carry." He paused. "And I'm sorry for what came into your town overnight. I understand if that's frightening." "Are you going to tell me it's not?" Ruth asked. Mason looked at her steadily. "No," he said. "I'm going to tell you why we came." Mason Cole did not sit down when Ruth offered him a chair. He stood in the middle of their small living room with his hands at his sides and his eyes moving slowly around the space. Not suspicious, just careful, the way men carry themselves when they've spent years making sure they know every exit before they commit to a conversation. Ruth stood near the kitchen doorway. Lily sat on the couch with her knees pulled up, watching him the way she watched things she was trying to understand. "Savannah has 2 cracked ribs," Mason said. His voice was level, controlled in the way of a person who has learned that losing control in front of people costs something they can't always afford to pay. "A hairline fracture along her left cheekbone. They're saying she was out there between 30 and 36 hours. Ruth's hand went to her mouth. "She wouldn't tell me at first," he continued. "When I got to the hospital, she kept saying she was fine, it was handled, don't do anything. That's Savannah. 22 years of being married to me, and she still thinks she needs to protect me from things." Something moved across his face. Grief, or something adjacent to grief. "But she told me about Lily." He looked at Lily when he said it. "She said a little girl sat down on the dirt and offered her water and told her she wasn't leaving her alone. She said," he stopped, started again. "She said that's the thing that kept her from giving up. Before you got there, she'd been working on convincing herself that the smartest thing was to stop fighting it. She'd been there a long time, and nobody was coming." He paused. "Then you came." Lily didn't say anything. She wasn't sure what to say. She looked at her grandmother, who was looking at Mason Cole with an expression that had started as suspicion and was becoming something harder to categorize. "Who did it?" Ruth asked. Mason's jaw shifted. "I know who did it. Are they going to come back?" He looked at Ruth directly. "No," he said, "they're not." The way he said it didn't leave room for follow-up questions, and Ruth, who was not a woman who was easily silenced, recognized a door closed and let it stay that way for the moment. "Why are there 700 of your people in my town?" she asked instead. "Because my wife almost died," Mason said, "and a child saved her. And I wanted the people who mattered to me to be here when I said thank you in person." Ruth studied him for a long, unhurried moment. "That's a lot of motorcycles for a thank you. Savannah means a lot to a lot of people." "So does this town," Ruth said, "and most of the people in it have never seen anything like what pulled in last night. Half of them didn't sleep. Mason nodded, slow, genuine. I know. That's something I owe them too. He looked around the living room again, the crocheted throw over the armchair, the photographs on the walls, the ceramic rooster on the shelf that had been there since Lily could remember. We're not here to take anything from Pine Creek, Mrs. Morgan. We're here because of what it gave us. He meant Lily. She knew he meant her even before he looked back at her. I'd like to do something for her, he said, if you'll allow it. Ruth folded her arms. What kind of something? Something she can carry, he said. Something that means we remember. Walsh came by at 10:30, and she did not look surprised to find Mason Cole's boots on Ruth Morgan's front porch. She looked like a woman who had been running on coffee and contingency plans since about 3 in the morning. Mr. Cole, she said. Deputy, he said. They looked at each other the way two people look at each other when they've already spoken by phone and established the terms of a very careful peace. Walsh pulled Ruth aside into the kitchen while Lily stayed in the living room, and the low rhythm of their voices drifted through the wall without resolving into words. Lily sat across from Mason Cole, and he sat across from her, and neither of them spoke for a moment. Does it hurt? Lily asked finally. He looked at her. What? Knowing she was out there and you didn't know. Mason Cole was quiet for a beat. Yeah, he said, it does. My grandma says that's how you know something matters, because the not knowing hurts. He looked at her with that same expression Savannah had used in the clearing, the one Lily had later learned was called awe. Like she'd said something that surprised him by being true. Your grandmother sounds like a smart woman, he said. She is. She says most pain is just love with nowhere to go. Mason Cole put his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes were steadier, like he'd made a decision about something internal. I want you to meet some people, he said. Outside. When you're ready, nobody's going to make you do anything. What kind of people? The kind who came a long way because of what you did. Walsh emerged from the kitchen first, and behind her came Ruth. And Ruth's face was the careful neutral she wore when she'd made a decision she wasn't entirely at peace with yet, but had decided to commit to. 20 minutes, Ruth said. Outside. Me standing right there. Mason Cole stood. That's all I'm asking, he said. They went out. The street had rearranged itself while they'd been inside. The clusters that had been scattered up and down the sidewalk had organized into something more deliberate. People standing in loose groups on either side of the walk. A corridor of sorts, not planned-looking, but with the feel of something that had settled naturally into a shape with purpose. At the end of the walk, at the place where the front gate opened onto Maple Street, there was a space, just open ground, a circle of cleared sidewalk that felt intentional without anyone having said so. Lily walked out with Ruth's hand around her shoulder. She had expected noise, engines, the rumble and bluster that had shaken her window in the dark. But the street was quiet, the kind of quiet that takes effort to make, that requires a lot of people to all decide at the same time that this moment is worth silence. They looked at her, all of them, men and women, young and old, faces she had no names for. And they looked at her the way you look at something you've been waiting to see. Not with hunger, with something gentler, recognition maybe, the way you look at a person who did the thing you hope you would have done. Lily stood at the end of the walk and looked back at all of them, and felt something she couldn't name yet settle in her chest. Not pride, something quieter than pride. Something that felt like she was the right size for herself for the first time. A woman came forward from the crowd. She was moving carefully. Her left arm was close to her body, and she walked with the deliberate pace of someone managing pain. But her chin was up, and her eyes were clear. Savannah. She had changed out of the hospital gown into jeans and a clean shirt, and she wasn't wearing the leather vest this time. She looked smaller without it, more ordinary, more real. Her left eye was still half swollen, her lips still split, the line along her jaw still visible and dark. But she was walking. She was here. Lily didn't think about it. She just went forward. Savannah crouched down, wincing just slightly, just the one sound of breath that slipped out before she controlled it, and she put her good arm around Lily's shoulders and held on. "I told you I'd be okay," Lily said. Savannah pulled back just enough to look at her face. "You did," she said. "You were very sure about that." "I'm usually right about things." Savannah laughed. A real one this time, not the almost laugh from the clearing. It cost her something, the hand that came up to press briefly against her ribs. But she let it happen. "You are," she said. "I believe that." She reached into the pocket of her jacket, her good hand, slow and deliberate, and held something out to Lily. It was a folded piece of paper. "I wrote you something," Savannah said. "I know you're 8. I know you might not understand all of it right now, but I wanted you to have it in my words. Not Mason's, not anybody else's. Mine." Lily took it. She held it carefully, the way you hold things that matter. "Can I read it later?" she asked. "Whenever you want," Savannah said. "It'll mean the same thing whatever time you read it." She stood back up. Mason was beside her now, his hand at the small of her back, not holding her up, just there, just present. The particular kind of contact that says, "I'm here," without making a production of it. He looked at Lily. "There's something we want to give you," he said, "from all of us." One of the women from the crowd came forward, older, 60s, with silver hair and a vest covered in patches, and the kind of face that made you feel like you could tell her anything. And she was carrying something folded over her arm. A vest, not a child's toy version, a real one, leather, soft from use, smaller than the ones the adults wore but built exactly the same way, with the same weight and construction. On the back, the patch, white background, red letters, the same patch Savannah had been wearing in the clearing. The silver-haired woman held it out to Lily. Ruth made a sound beside her. Not a word, just a sound, low and complicated. Mason said, "This is a piece of who we are, what it means. The reason we patch someone in is because they proved something, not with words, with what they actually did when it mattered." He paused. "Lily, you didn't know us. You had no reason to help her. You were 8 years old and alone in the woods, and you stayed anyway." The street was perfectly still. "You are," Mason said, "the bravest person in this crowd. And there are a lot of people in this crowd who have done some very hard things." Lily looked at the vest. She looked at her grandmother. Ruth's jaw was working. Her eyes were bright. She gave a single nod, small, tight, the kind of nod that comes from the place that's already lost the fight against being moved. Lily took the vest. It was heavier than it looked. She turned it over in her hands, ran her thumb along the stitching of the patch, felt the soft, worn leather under her palms. She put it on over her shirt, and it hung past her hips, and the shoulders came down to her elbows, and it smelled like road dust and oil, and something she had no word for that she would spend years trying to describe. Someone started it, she never found out who. A slow, rolling sound that built from one end of the crowd to the other. Not shouting, not revving engines, just hands coming together. People who had stood quiet through the whole thing, finally letting something out. A sound that grew and grew until it was filling the whole street. Until Ruth pressed her fingers over her mouth, and Walsh looked away for a moment and rubbed her face. Until Savannah Cole stood in the middle of the crowd she had known for most of her adult life and let the tears come without apologizing for them. Lily stood in the middle of all of it in a leather vest that was 4 sizes too big for her, and she held very still, and she let herself feel all of it, because her grandmother had taught her that when something good happens, you don't rush through it, you stay in it, you be there for it the way you'd be there for the hard things. Walsh pulled Mason aside around noon, and Lily was close enough to hear it. "The men who did this to your wife," Walsh said. Her voice was quiet, professional, the voice of someone who needed an answer and was trying to ask the question in a way that would get one. I need to know if they're a threat to anyone in this town. Mason looked at her. I told Mrs. Morgan they weren't coming back. I know what you told her. I'm asking you directly. He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, thinking, choosing his words with the care of a man who understood that what he said next was going to land on official record, whether it was written down or not. The men who did this to Savannah, he said finally, made a decision about what kind of organization they were going to be. They made it clear, and now we understand each other. He paused. Pine Creek is not in any danger from them. That's the truest thing I can tell you. Walsh looked at him for a long moment. And what about the men who came with you? They're eating lunch at Myrna's diner, Mason said. Leaving her a tip she's probably going to think is a mistake. Walsh looked down at her notepad, looked up. There's something I need you to know, she said, and I'm telling you as a courtesy, not because I'm required to. Mason waited. The people who took Savannah, Walsh said carefully, weren't just trying to send you a message. We found some things in the woods, not far from where she was, that suggest the operation goes deeper than a dispute between clubs. She stopped. I can't tell you more than that right now, but I need you to understand that whatever you think this was about, it's possible it's about something else, something bigger. The quality of Mason's stillness changed. Lily felt it even from across the yard. A shift, like a room when the temperature drops, like the air just before something strikes. What kind of bigger? He asked. That's what we're trying to determine, Walsh said. In the meantime, I'm asking for your cooperation, not your interference. Mason Cole looked at Deputy Walsh for a long, measured moment. The sun moved a fraction. Somewhere down the street an engine turned over and then went quiet. What did you find in those woods? He said. Walsh closed her notepad. I'll be in touch, she said, and she walked back toward her cruiser, and she didn't look back. Lily watched Mason's face after Walsh left. He stood at the edge of the yard with his hands at his sides, and he was very, very still. And something behind his eyes was working through something large and dark and not finished yet. She recognized it because she had seen it in her grandmother's face the night her grandfather died. That particular stillness that means a person is standing at the edge of something they haven't let themselves fully understand yet, because understanding it would require them to move, and they're not ready to move. She walked over and stood next to him. He looked down at her. She told you something that scared you, Lily said. Mason Cole looked at this child, this impossible, specific, wide-open child, and he breathed out slowly through his nose. Yeah, he said, she did. Is Savannah still in danger? A pause, just a breath, just long enough to be honest. I don't know, he said. Lily looked down the street. The crowd was still there, moving easier now, talking and eating. Some of the children from town who had been watching from windows finally drifting out to look at the motorcycles up close. Myrna from the diner was standing outside her door with a coffee pot, refilling cups, because Myrna had been feeding this town for 31 years, and 700 extra people was just 31 years of practice paying off. Then we find out, Lily said. Mason looked at her. We? You said I was brave, she said. Brave doesn't stop. That's what my grandma says. Brave isn't what you do one time. It's what you keep doing. Mason Cole stared down at this 8-year-old girl in a leather vest that came to her knees, and something in his face settled into something that wasn't quite peace, but was pointed in that direction. He was going to answer her. But before he could, his phone went off. He looked at the screen. The stillness came back, harder this time, colder, a door slamming shut inside something that had just barely been opening. He looked up from the phone and across the yard at Savannah, who was sitting with Ruth on the porch steps, talking in the quiet way of two women who have decided to trust each other. Savannah felt his gaze the way you feel things from people who know you, lifted her eyes, read his face in the half second it took, and went still herself. He walked toward her. She rose to meet him. They spoke in voices too low for anyone else to hear. What Lily saw, because Lily always saw things, was the moment Savannah's face changed. The moment the careful, controlled relief she'd been wearing since she walked off that hospital elevator cracked open and showed what was underneath it. And underneath it was not just pain and not just fear, but something specific and targeted. The look of someone who has just heard the name of something they hoped they would never hear again. Lily looked at her grandmother. Ruth was watching the same thing. "What do you think happened?" Lily asked. Ruth put her arm around her. "Something that isn't over yet," she said quietly. Down at the end of the walk, Mason put his phone in his pocket and turned to face his people. 700 of them stretched up and down Maple Street, and he put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled, sharp and clean and carrying. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. "Mount up," he said. Not shouted, just said it, flat and direct, the way you say things when you need them to happen immediately. And 700 people moved at once. Lily counted 11 seconds between Mason's whistle and the first engine turning over. By 30 seconds, the sound had become a wall, deep and continuous and physical, something you felt in your sternum before you heard it with your ears. By a minute, half of Maple Street was already moving, bikes pulling out in single file with the unhurried precision of people who have ridden together long enough that the group moves like one organism. Ruth kept her hand on Lily's shoulder. Neither of them said anything. Savannah stood at the edge of the walk with Mason's jacket over her shoulders. He'd put it there without asking, and she hadn't taken it off. Watching her people pull out of Pine Creek the way you watch something leave that you weren't finished with yet. Her face was composed. Her hands were not. She had them pressed flat against her thighs, and Lily could see the way her fingers pressed in and released, like she was squeezing something invisible to keep herself steady. Mason came back to her. He put his mouth close to her ear and said something Lily couldn't hear. Savannah nodded once. Stiff, controlled. Then she looked across the yard at Lily. "We have to go," she said. "I'm sorry." Lily walked over to her. "Don't apologize." Savannah's mouth did something that started as a smile and didn't quite finish. She reached out and touched the collar of the vest, the one still hanging off Lily's shoulders, straightening it slightly, the way you straighten something that belongs to a person you care about. "You keep that," she said. "That's yours." "I know," Lily said. Savannah looked at her for one more second. Something moved through her eyes, quick, layered, complicated. And then she turned and walked with Mason toward the last of the bikes, and the crowd closed around them, and they were gone. The silence that came back to Maple Street afterward was the particular kind that follows something large. Not peaceful, heavy, the kind that has weight and shape and edges. Ruth put both arms around Lily from behind. "Come inside," she said. "In a minute," Lily said. She stood at the edge of the yard and watched the last bike disappear around the corner at the end of Maple. And she thought about Walsh's face when she'd closed her notepad and walked away. She thought about the way Mason's expression had changed when he looked at his phone. She thought about Savannah's hands pressing against her thighs. Something was wrong. She didn't know what it was yet, but she knew the shape of it the way you know a sound is coming before you can hear it. Some animal alertness that lives below the thinking part of the brain. She went inside. She sat at the kitchen table and unfolded Savannah's letter. The handwriting was uneven, a person writing with a bruised hand, pressing harder than they should. And it was short, just a paragraph. But Lily read it 3 times, and the third time she read it, she understood something that the first 2 passes hadn't given her. Savannah had not written the letter in the hospital. She'd written it before that, before the deputies, before the ambulance. She'd written it in the hospital only in terms of what she'd said, but the things she described, the details she used, the quality of the light in the clearing, the specific sound of the creek, the way Lily had sat cross-legged without asking permission, those were the observations of a woman who had been very much in that moment and was writing from inside it. Not from memory, from presence. Which meant Savannah Cole had expected she might not make it out of those woods, and she had wanted, if that happened, for someone to know that the last thing she had felt was not alone. Lily folded the letter very carefully and put it in her chest of drawers under the good sweater, the one her grandmother only let her wear on important occasions. Walsh called at 3 in the afternoon. Ruth answered, and Lily sat at the kitchen table pretending to do the math worksheet her grandmother had set out, and she listened. Ruth's side of the conversation was mostly silence, broken by single words. Yes. When? How many? She said, I see, twice. She said, thank you, Karen, in the way she said it when she didn't feel thankful, but recognized that someone was trying to do right by her. When she hung up, she stood at the counter with her back to Lily for a moment. Grandma, Ruth turned. There was a truck, she said, found abandoned on a fire road about 4 miles from where you found Savannah. Walsh says it's connected. She stopped. There were things in it, Lily, things that... She pressed her lips together. Walsh says it wasn't just about Savannah. It wasn't just about Mason Cole or his people. She says it looks like a trafficking operation, like Savannah may have stumbled onto something or discovered something, and that's why they took her. The kitchen was very quiet. Were they going to... Lily started. Walsh doesn't know everything yet, Ruth said quickly and firmly, because Ruth Morgan understood exactly what question was forming, and she was not ready to let her 8-year-old granddaughter complete it. What she does know is that this is bigger than Pine Creek, and the FBI is involved now, and she wanted us to know in case... She stopped again. In case anyone came asking questions. About me? About what you saw, what Savannah said to you, whether you noticed anything in those woods. Ruth sat down across from her. Lily, I need you to think. Is there anything you didn't tell the deputies? Anything you saw or heard that you didn't mention because it seemed small? Lily thought. She went back through it the way her teacher had taught her to review a test. Slowly, systematically, not skipping anything because it seemed obvious. There was a deputy, she said, the young one. He kept looking at the trees. Ruth waited. Not the way you look when you're checking for danger, Lily said slowly. He already knew there wasn't any danger. He was looking like he was checking for something else. Like he was waiting to see if something was still there or already gone. Ruth's hands went flat on the table. I didn't think about it until right now, Lily said. But that's not how you look at trees when you're scared. That's how you look at trees when you know what's in them. Ruth picked up the phone. Walsh arrived in 22 minutes, not in her cruiser, in her personal car, a gray sedan, and she came to the back door instead of the front. Lily noticed that too. She sat across from Lily at the kitchen table and set her phone face down and folded her hands and said, Tell me everything about Deputy Carl Reyes, everything you remember. Lily told her. Walsh listened without writing anything down. That by itself told Lily something. When Lily finished, Walsh sat for a moment looking at the table. Her jaw was tight. Her breathing was the kind of control that meant the uncontrolled version was working very hard underneath it. How long has he worked for the department? Ruth asked. 14 months, Walsh said. And before that? Walsh looked at Ruth. Before that, she said, is what I'm currently looking at. She picked up her phone, set it down again. I want to be clear about something. I'm not here in any official capacity right now. I'm here because I've known your family for 11 years, and I'm not willing to let an 8-year-old get tangled up in something she doesn't deserve to be tangled up in without somebody in her corner. Ruth reached across the table and put her hand over Walsh's. Walsh looked at it, looked up. You think he warned them, Ruth said. When the call came in, you think he radioed ahead? Walsh didn't answer. She didn't have to. So whoever chained Savannah to that tree, Ruth said carefully, had time to clear out before you arrived. We found the site clean, Walsh said. No trace of anyone who put her there, which, for 36 hours in a chained woman, in the middle of a forest is... She stopped. It's not nothing. Lily's math worksheet was still on the table in front of her. She looked at it without seeing it. Long division. The numbers meant nothing right now. Does Mason know? She asked. Walsh looked at her, held the look for a moment. I suspect Mason Cole knows considerably more than I do about a number of things, she said, which is part of what concerns me. The call came in at 7:40 that evening. Ruth's phone, not Walsh's, which meant whoever was calling had their home number, which was not listed anywhere. Ruth answered. She listened for 6 seconds. Then she held the phone out to Lily. It's Savannah, she said. Her voice was careful and neutral the way it got when she was deciding how much of her reaction to show. Lily took the phone. Hello? Hey. Savannah's voice was steadier than it had been that morning, more controlled, but underneath the steadiness there was something taut, a wire pulled too tight. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without... A pause. Are you somewhere your grandmother can hear you? She's right here, Lily said. Good, keep her there. Another pause. The sound of something in the background, movement, voices, low and distant. What I'm about to tell you, I need you to pass to Walsh. Not through any official channel, directly, in person. Can you do that? Yes, Lily said. The truck they found on the fire road, Savannah said. It's not the right truck. Lily went still. The one they actually used is in a garage on Clement Road, about 2 miles past the old feed store. I saw it when they moved me. I memorized the address because I'm the kind of person who does that. And I didn't tell the deputies this morning because I didn't know yet which ones I could trust. A beat. I still don't know that. But I trust Walsh because you called her and she came. And I trust you because... Savannah stopped, pressed through whatever was constricting her voice. Because I know who you are. I'll tell her, Lily said. There's more. Savannah's voice dropped another register. The operation that was running out of that garage, it's not local. There are people connected to it who are not from Pine Creek, who don't live anywhere near Pine Creek, and at least one of them is connected to a name that would surprise you. Someone the town knows. A pause that stretched just long enough to become a wait. I don't have confirmation yet. Mason is working on it, but Walsh needs to know that the scope of this is not what the department thinks it is. And the timeline, she stopped. The timeline matters. Because if they figure out that the truck was found, they're going to move everything. Tonight. Tonight, Lily repeated. Tonight, Savannah said. Lily looked at her grandmother. Ruth looked back at her with the expression she wore when she was about to do something she hadn't expected to do today. We'll find Walsh, Lily said. Don't call her, Savannah said. Go to her, in person. Don't use the phone. A pause. And Lily? Yeah? Thank you. Again. A breath. I keep thanking you and it keeps not being enough. Stop thanking me and just be okay, Lily said. A sound from Savannah that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob or might have been both at the same time. Working on it, she said, and the line went quiet. Walsh lived on Porter Street, 6 blocks from the Morgan house, in a blue house with a porch light that she left on every night regardless of whether she was home. A habit from the years she'd worked nights and wanted something familiar to come back to. Lily knew this because Walsh had been to their house for dinner twice a year for 11 years, and Ruth had told Lily the porch light story once, and Lily had remembered it the way she remembered things that seemed like they might matter later. They walked. Ruth set a pace that was fast without running, and Lily matched it step for step, and neither of them spoke because they had already said what needed saying in the kitchen, and everything after that was just movement in getting there. Walsh answered the door before they knocked. She'd seen them coming up the walk. What happened? She said. Ruth told her. All of it. Walsh stood in her doorway in civilian clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, no badge visible, and she listened with the kind of stillness that meant she was already 3 steps ahead in her thinking, already building the structure of what came next. When Ruth finished, Walsh said, "Clement Road." "Past the old feed store," Lily said. 2 miles. Walsh turned back into the house. They heard her moving, quick, purposeful, the sounds of someone pulling things out and putting things on, and making calls in a voice too low to make out words. She was back at the door in 4 minutes with her badge clipped to her belt and a look on her face that Lily recognized from movies, but had never seen in real life on a person who wasn't acting. "I need you both to go home," Walsh said. "Lock the door. Don't answer it for anyone you don't know. I'll call you when I can." "Who are you calling?" Ruth asked. "People above the department," Walsh said. "People who don't have 14-month deputies." She looked at Lily. "You did good. You do good every single time, and I need you to let me do my part now." Lily nodded. Walsh put her hand briefly on Lily's shoulder, just a second, just a touch, and then she was moving down her porch steps and toward her car, phone already at her ear. They were home by 8:30. Ruth locked the front door, the back door, the sliding door in the kitchen that was usually left unlocked from March through October. She made tea she didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table and held the mug and looked at nothing. Lily sat across from her. "Are you scared?" Lily asked. Ruth looked at her granddaughter. "Yes," she said, because Ruth Morgan did not lie to children about important things. "Me too," Lily said. "A little." "That's appropriate," Ruth said. "Only fools aren't scared of the right things." "You think Walsh will be okay?" "Karen Walsh has been doing this for 22 years, Ruth said. "She knows what she's doing." "Do you think it's someone in town? The name Savannah mentioned?" Ruth wrapped both hands around her mug. "I don't know," she said. "And I'm going to try very hard not to guess, because guessing at something like that does damage, even when you're wrong." Lily nodded. She pulled the vest off the back of her chair. She'd worn it home, and Ruth hadn't said a word about it, and held it in her lap and ran her thumb along the stitching, the way she'd been doing since Savannah handed it to her that morning. It was starting to feel like a habit, like something her hands knew to do when she needed to think. The house was quiet. The street outside was quiet. Pine Creek at 8:30 on a Thursday in August was always quiet, the kind of town that folded itself in by dark and didn't ask questions until morning. But tonight, the quiet felt different. Lily lay in bed at 9:30, not sleeping, with the vest folded on the chair beside her, watching the ceiling. She was thinking about Deputy Reyes looking at the trees. She was thinking about the truck that wasn't the right truck. She was thinking about Savannah saying the timeline matters, the particular urgency in the word tonight. She was thinking about what Walsh had said, someone the town knows. And she was going through every face she knew in Pine Creek, the way you go through a deck of cards, one by one, holding each one up to the light. She was almost to the end of the deck when she heard a car in the street. Slow. Not stopping, just slowing, the engine dropping in pitch the way it does when a driver is looking for something. Then it picked up again and moved on. She listened. 3 minutes later, it came back. Same speed, same pitch drop, same pause. Lily sat up. She went to the window. The street was empty by the time she got there, just taillights rounding the corner at the end of Maple, red and distant. She stood at the glass with her hand flat against it and her heart doing something fast and specific in her chest. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A number she didn't recognize, no name. She stared at it for 3 buzzes. Then she picked it up. "Don't turn any lights on," said a voice she didn't know. Low, male, with an accent she couldn't place exactly, somewhere south of where they were, somewhere flat and sunbaked. "And don't wake your grandmother." "Who is this?" Lily said. "Someone who knows what you told Walsh tonight," the voice said. "Someone who needs you to understand that the people in that garage on Clement Road, they know it too. And they know it because someone who isn't Carl Reyes told them. Someone who's been in this a lot longer than 14 months. The air in Lily's room felt very thin all of a sudden. "Why are you calling me?" she said. "Because you're the only one in that town who's been right about everything so far," the voice said. "And because Walsh is driving into something and she doesn't know the whole picture yet." Lily's hand tightened on the phone. "What's the whole picture?" she said. A pause. "Just long enough." "The name Savannah almost gave you," the voice said. "She didn't finish it, did she?" It wasn't a question. He already knew. "No," Lily said. "The name is Harlan Dell," the voice said. "And Harlan Dell is the reason your sheriff went fishing in Nevada 3 days ago and hasn't come back yet." Lily stood at the window with the phone pressed against her ear, and the name Harlan Dell sitting in her chest like a stone dropped into still water, sending rings outward in every direction. She knew that name. Harlan Dell was the deputy mayor of Pine Creek. He had been for 9 years. He coached Little League in the spring and collected donations for the food pantry at Thanksgiving, and his wife made pie for the church auction every year that always sold for twice what anyone else's sold for. He had shaken Lily's hand at the 4th of July parade last summer and told her she was growing up fast and asked about her grandmother's garden. He had kind eyes. She had always thought he had kind eyes. "You still there?" the voice on the phone said. "Yes," Lily said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "How do you know about Harlan Dell?" "Because I've been watching this operation for 7 months, the voice said. "From the outside, not law enforcement, someone who had personal reasons to understand what was moving through this county and where it was going." A pause. "My daughter was 14 when they took her. That was 2 years ago. I've been following this thing ever since." The air went out of Lily's lungs all at once. "Is she?" "She's alive," he said, and the way he said it told her everything about what those 2 years had cost him. "She's alive and she's safe now, but the people who took her are still running, or they were." Another pause. "Until Savannah Cole got too close to their operation and they decided to make an example." Lily sat on the edge of her bed. Her legs had made the decision before her brain did. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "I want you to call Mason Cole," he said. "Not Walsh, not yet. Mason Cole, right now. Because he's already moving toward that garage, and he doesn't know Harlan Dell is going to be there. And Harlan Dell is not going to let anyone walk out of that garage alive if he thinks they know his name." Lily was already on her feet. "I don't have Mason's number." "I'm going to text it to you," the voice said. "The second you hang up, you call him and you tell him the name and you tell him to wait for Walsh before he goes in, no matter what his instincts are telling him. Can you do that?" "Yes," Lily said. "Who are you?" A beat of silence, not evasion, something heavier than that. "My name is David Carver," he said, "and after tonight, if things go right, you'll never need to hear it again." He paused once more. "You're 8 years old, and you've done more to unravel this than people who've been working it professionally. That should not be something you're proud of. That should terrify every adult in your life." "It terrifies my grandmother," Lily said. "Good," he said. "She sounds like a smart woman." He hung up. The text came in 4 seconds later. Just a number, no name. Lily stared at it for one breath. Then she called. Mason picked up on the second ring, which meant he was awake, which meant he was already moving, which meant Carver had been right. "Lily." He said her name like he'd been expecting the call, not surprised, braced. "Harlan Dell," she said. "Deputy Mayor. He's connected to the operation. He might be at the garage tonight." Silence. Not long, just enough. "Where did you get that name?" Mason said. "Someone named David Carver. He says he's been tracking this for 7 months. His daughter was one of their victims." She heard something shift on his end. Movement, a door, the sound of wind. "He says you need to wait for Walsh. He says if you go in before she gets there with backup, Dell will know, and he'll make sure nobody talks." "I'm 3 minutes from Clement Road," Mason said. "I know. Please wait." A pause. The wind sound continued. She could hear him thinking, actually hear the quality of his silence shift and reshape as he ran through whatever calculus men like Mason Cole ran through when their instincts said go and someone was asking them to stop. "Has Walsh left her house yet?" he asked. "I don't know. She left 20 minutes ago." "Then she's already there, or she's close." His voice was flat and clipped and moving fast through the words. "If Dell is inside when Walsh pulls up alone..." "She said she was calling people above the department," Lily said. "That takes time." He paused. "Time we may not have." "Mason." She said his name the way her grandmother said things when she needed them to land. Flat and full and direct. "Savannah is alive because someone stayed. Please stay." The longest pause yet. 2 minutes, he said. "I'll give Walsh 2 minutes to make contact. After that..." 2 minutes, Lily said. "Okay." She hung up and called Walsh. Walsh answered on the first ring. Her voice was already tight, already running. "Lily, I told you to stay home." "Harlan Dell," Lily said. "He's involved. He may be at the garage right now. And Mason Cole is 3 minutes out, and he's only going to wait 2. Dead silence on Walsh's end. Then, "Say that name again." "Harlan Dell." A sound that was not quite a word, something between a breath and a curse, compressed into a single syllable that told Lily everything about what that name meant to Karen Walsh. "How certain?" Walsh said. "A man named David Carver. His daughter was trafficked 2 years ago. He's been tracking the operation independently for 7 months." "Carver." Walsh's voice shifted. "Recognition. I know that name. He came to the department 8 months ago and we..." She stopped. "We turned him away because the information he brought didn't have enough to act on." A pause waited with something that sounded like regret, because Dell was in the room when he presented it, and Dell said the sourcing was unreliable. The kitchen clock in Lily's head turned over. "He sat right there," Walsh said, more to herself than to Lily. "He sat there and he looked David Carver in the face, and he called him unreliable. And we sent that man home and his daughter was still..." She cut herself off. Okay, I have 2 FBI units 7 minutes out. I need Mason Cole to hold." "I told him 2 minutes, Lily said. "That was about 90 seconds ago." "God," Walsh said. Then, "Call him back. Tell him I'm 1 minute from the garage and federal backup is 6 minutes behind me. Tell him to sit on it until he sees my headlights." Lily was already dialing. Mason answered before it rang. "Walsh is 1 minute out," Lily said. "Federal backup 6 minutes. She needs you to hold until you see her headlights." A sound from his end she couldn't categorize. Not agreement, not refusal. The sound of a man running 2 versions of the same scenario side by side and trying to determine which one ends with fewer people bleeding. 1 minute, he said. "Headlights." "Headlights," she confirmed. She sat on her bedroom floor, back against the bed, the phone in both hands, and she waited. Ruth appeared in the doorway. She had heard enough. She stood with her robe pulled tight and her face doing the thing it did when she was beyond words and had decided that presence was the only thing she had left to offer. She came and sat on the floor beside Lily, which was not a thing Ruth Morgan did easily at 67, and she didn't say anything, and Lily leaned into her shoulder, and they waited together. The call came from Walsh at 10:47. "We have the garage," Walsh said. She sounded like a person who has been running and has stopped and is now standing very still, taking inventory of what's still intact. "4 arrests, FBI is on site." A pause. "Dell was there, he's in custody." Lily exhaled. "Is everyone okay?" she asked. "One of Mason's people took a graze to the arm. Everybody else is standing." Walsh paused. "He didn't wait for my headlights, Lily. He waited until he heard my tires on the gravel, and then he went through the side door." Another pause, with something complicated living inside it. His timing was either very precise or very lucky. I genuinely cannot tell you which. Is Savannah okay? Savannah wasn't there. She's still at the hotel where Mason had her taken. A breath. She's going to be very okay. This is over. Lily looked at her grandmother. Ruth was watching her face. Not completely over, Lily said. What do you mean? Carver said the people who took his daughter are still running. The garage is one piece. You have Dell, but the network is going to take time, Walsh said. That's not an 8-year-old's problem to solve. I know, Lily said. I just want you to know that I know it's not finished. Walsh was quiet for a moment. Yeah, she said, it's not finished, but tonight we got enough to pull the thread. And when you pull the thread on something like this, eventually the whole thing comes apart. She paused. Get some sleep, I mean it. Lily said goodnight. Ruth took the phone from her hands and set it on the nightstand with the careful precision of someone putting something down that has been held too tightly for too long. Come on, Ruth said, and helped her into bed, and sat on the edge of the mattress the way she had when Lily was much younger, and needed someone to stay until the dark stopped feeling so large. She said it's over, Lily said. I heard. Is it really? Ruth smoothed the blanket across Lily's shoulders. The part that needed to happen tonight happened, she said. The rest, that's for other people to carry now. Lily stared at the ceiling. I keep thinking about Carver, she said. His daughter, 2 years. I know. He came to the department and Dell was right there in the room, and nobody believed him. Ruth's hands stopped moving on the blanket. Yes, she said. He did everything right and it still took 2 years, Lily said. Ruth looked at her granddaughter in the dark for a long moment. Sometimes it does, she said. That's the hardest true thing I know. Doing right and things going right are not the same schedule. She paused. But tonight they lined up, and Carver was part of that. Everything he did for 2 years was part of that. Lily thought about that, let it settle. Grandma, she said, I think someone should tell him thank you. Ruth smiled. In the dark, Lily felt it more than saw it. The shift in her grandmother's presence. The particular warmth of a smile that happens when a child says something that confirms every decision you've ever made about how to raise them. I think so too, Ruth said. We'll figure that out tomorrow. Sleep came faster than Lily expected. What woke her was not a sound but an absence of sound. The particular silence of a phone that has been buzzing and then stopped. She picked it up. A text from an unknown number. She already knew who it was. It said, "They're going to be okay, all of them. Thank you." She typed back, "You too, Mr. Carver." She put the phone down and went back to sleep. 3 days later, the Pine Creek Gazette ran a story on the front page with a photograph that Lily thought was embarrassing and her grandmother thought was perfect. Lily in the leather vest, standing in front of the house, squinting slightly into the morning sun. The headline said something about bravery and the community that she read once, and then folded the paper shut because it made her feel too visible in a way she didn't know how to hold yet. The FBI confirmed 4 arrests connected to the garage on Clement Road. Harlan Dell was among them. The story in larger papers didn't mention Pine Creek by name at first, and then it did. And then it mentioned Lily by age and first name only, because Walsh had made it very clear to every journalist who called that the child involved was not available for comment and would not be made available. Mason Cole called Ruth on the second day, not about business, not about the case. He called to say that Savannah had been cleared by her doctors, and that they were heading north for a while, somewhere quieter, and that if Ruth and Lily ever needed anything at all, ever, they had a number and they should use it without hesitation. Ruth thanked him. She used the real thank you, not the polite one. On the third day, a car Lily didn't recognize pulled up in front of the house and sat there for a moment. Then the driver got out. He was a tall man, thin, with the kind of tired that lives in a person's face after it's been there long enough to become part of the structure. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house. Lily was on the porch. She'd been watching for him without knowing she was watching. The way you wait for things you've decided to trust without quite deciding to trust them yet. He saw her. He stopped. "Lily Morgan?" he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at her for a moment with an expression she recognized. She'd been seeing it on faces for 3 days now. That particular look of a person who expected something small and found something that didn't fit the scale of what they expected. "I'm David Carver," he said. Lily came down the porch steps. He was not what she had constructed in her mind during those 48 hours of phone calls and held breath. The voice on the phone had been controlled, precise, the voice of someone who had compressed everything human and ragged in themselves into a tool, because the tool was all that was useful. The man in front of her had let the compression go. He was just a father. A tired, hollowed out, still standing father who had spent 2 years being precise because his daughter needed him to be precise. And now it was over, and he didn't quite know what to do with his hands. "My daughter wants to send you something," he said. "She's not ready to talk to people yet. Her therapist says that's normal and to give her time. But she knows about you," I told her. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, held it out. "She drew this for you." Lily took it. "She draws?" "All the time," he said. "Always has, even when—" He stopped, looked away briefly. Even through the worst of it, she kept drawing. Her therapist said it was how she stayed herself. He looked back at Lily. "She said she wanted to give you something she made. Not something bought, something made." Lily looked at the envelope. Her name was on the front in careful, deliberate letters. The handwriting of someone who understood that the act of writing a person's name was a way of honoring them. "Tell her thank you," Lily said. "And tell her—" She thought for a second. "Tell her she was brave too. For the whole 2 years. That's the hardest kind." Carver looked at her. His jaw shifted. His eyes did the thing that adult eyes did around her sometimes, went bright in a way that they were clearly deciding whether to let show. "I'll tell her," he said. Ruth came to the door. Lily heard the screen push open behind her. "Mr. Carver," Ruth said, "I just made coffee. You'll come in." It was not a question. Ruth Morgan had not made requests of this kind for 67 years and was not about to start. Carver looked at Ruth. Then he looked at Lily. Then he did something that seemed to surprise him. He laughed. Short, quiet, the laugh of a man who hasn't had a reason in a long time and finds one in the most unexpected place. "Yes, ma'am," he said. They went inside. Lily sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in her hands and Carver across from her, and Ruth put coffee in front of him and sat down too. And for a while, nobody talked about the garage or Dell or the FBI or any of it. Ruth asked about his daughter's drawings, and he pulled out his phone and showed them pictures, and his voice when he talked about her art was completely different from any voice Lily had heard him use. Softer, wider, the voice of a man who was allowing himself to hope. Lily opened the envelope. Inside was a drawing, done in colored pencil on heavy paper. It showed a girl, small with yellow hair, sitting cross-legged on the ground in a forest. In front of her sat a woman, leaning against a tree, both hands around a water bottle. The yellow-haired girl's eyes were open and steady, and they were pointed directly at the woman, and the woman's face was turned slightly, and there was just the beginning of something on it. Not relief yet. The moment just before relief. The moment when you start to believe that someone actually stayed. Lily looked at it for a long time. "She's never met you," Carver said quietly, "but she said she knew exactly what your face looked like, from the way I described what you did." Lily set the drawing down carefully on the table and smoothed the edge with her thumb. "She got it right," Lily said. Carver wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. Outside, Maple Street was exactly what it always was. A quiet street in a quiet town in a county that most people drove through without stopping. The feed store on Route 9. Myrna's diner with its coffee pot always ready. The church where Ruth ran the rummage sale. The trail at the edge of town that wound into the pines and followed the sound of the creek. None of it looked different than it had a week ago. But it was. Walsh pulled up outside 20 minutes later. She came to the back door, the way she'd taken to doing since Tuesday, and Ruth let her in without ceremony. She looked better than she had, slept at least some, fed at least somewhat, and she set a folder on the table and sat down. "Preliminary findings from the FBI," she said. "I'm not supposed to share this, but I'm sharing it." She looked at Carver. "Mr. Carver, a lot of what you brought to us 8 months ago is in here, with attribution." She paused. "I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry about the room you had to present it in." Carver looked at the folder. He didn't open it, he just looked at it for a moment. The way you look at something that contains a reckoning you've been waiting for long enough that the waiting became its own kind of life. "How many?" he said. His voice was very quiet. 11 confirmed so far, Walsh said. "Ages ranging from 13 to 22. All recovered alive." She paused. "All of them." Carver pressed his lips together. His hands around the mug went white at the knuckles. He nodded once, very slowly, the nod of someone receiving something they stopped letting themselves want because the wanting was too dangerous. "All of them," he said. "All of them," Walsh confirmed. The kitchen was very quiet. Lily reached across the table and put her small hand over Carver's. He looked down at it. Then he looked at her, and whatever he'd been holding for 2 years, all of it, the precise voice, the controlled silence, the compressed and weaponized grief, let go. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Ruth stood up, quietly, and went to stand by the window, giving him the room to fall apart privately in a kitchen full of people who understood that some things you carry so long, they become part of you. And when you finally set them down, you have to remember how to stand without the weight. Walsh looked at the table. Lily stayed where she was, her hands still over Carver's, steady and small and absolutely present. Outside, a car went past on Maple Street, an ordinary car going somewhere ordinary. Pine Creek on an ordinary morning. But in Ruth Morgan's kitchen, something was finishing that had needed to finish for a very long time. And every person at that table knew it, and none of them rushed it. They let it take as long as it needed to take. Carver left at noon with a handshake for Ruth and a look for Lily that contained more than handshakes and looks usually carry. He said he'd be back in touch once his daughter was ready. He said it the way people say things they mean completely and don't need to ornament with extra words. Ruth walked him to the door and watched his car until it turned the corner. And when she came back to the kitchen, her face was the face of a woman who has witnessed something that needed witnessing and is now filing it somewhere permanent. Walsh stayed another hour. She drank a second cup of coffee she didn't ask for because Ruth put it in front of her. And Walsh had learned over 11 years that Ruth Morgan's second cup of coffee was not optional. She talked through what would happen next, the federal case, the timeline, the likelihood that Lily would be asked to give a formal statement at some point as the person who initially found Savannah. She used the word deposition and then looked at Lily's face and said, "It just means telling the truth to someone with a pen. You're very good at that." Lily said she knew. Walsh left. Ruth washed the cups. Lily sat at the table with Carver's daughter's drawing in front of her, and she looked at the two figures, the small yellow-haired girl and the woman against the tree, and she thought about what it meant that a girl she'd never met had drawn her face from the inside of a story she'd only heard secondhand and gotten it right. That afternoon, Ruth took her to get Biscuit. He had been found 2 days earlier by the Hendersons' oldest son, who'd spotted him sitting under their back deck looking profoundly sorry for himself and extremely hungry. He came home with his tail going in frantic circles and his whole back end moving like a separate creature, and he ran directly into Lily's legs and stayed there, vibrating, while she crouched down and held him and said his name into the top of his head until he stopped shaking. Ruth stood in the doorway and watched the two of them and said nothing. Some reunions don't need commentary. The subpoena came on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after the night at the garage. Walsh delivered it personally, which was not technically her job, but which she did anyway because Ruth deserved to hear it from a face she trusted. It was not for Lily, it was for Ruth, requesting her formal account of the events of the night she and Lily had walked to Walsh's house. Everything that had been said, the sequence, the timing. Standard procedure for a federal case of this scope, Walsh explained. Nothing adversarial, just the architecture of evidence needing to be sound. Ruth read it twice. Then she set it down and said, "Fine." That was it, just fine. Ruth Morgan had survived things that would have unraveled most people. A federal subpoena was not going to be the thing that bent her. But that night, she sat with Lily longer than usual at the kitchen table after dinner. Not talking, just being in the same room, the way people are when they're drawing something from each other's presence, without wanting to name what they're drawing. Lily was doing a puzzle. Ruth had a book open that she wasn't reading. "Are you nervous?" Lily asked. "About the deposition?" Ruth turned a page she hadn't read. "No, I just say what happened." "Then what are you nervous about?" Ruth looked up from the book she wasn't reading. "What makes you think I'm nervous about anything?" "You've turned that page 4 times, Lily said, "and you haven't eaten any of the crackers you put out for yourself." Ruth looked at the untouched crackers on the plate beside her. Then she looked at her granddaughter. Then she did something Lily didn't see often. She set the book face down and actually stopped performing the act of not being worried. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't gone into those woods," Ruth said quietly. "If you'd turned around. If Biscuit had come home on his own." She paused. "Savannah would still be there, and none of this." "But I did go," Lily said. "I know. And Biscuit didn't come home on his own." "I know that too. So the version where I turned around didn't happen," Lily said. She looked back at her puzzle. "You taught me that. You said the only version that matters is the one that actually happened. Everything else is just ghosts." Ruth sat very still. "You did tell me that," Lily said. "3rd grade, when I was upset about not making the school play. You said, 'Don't mourn the parts you didn't get. Be where you actually are.'" Ruth's mouth pressed together briefly. "I'm beginning to think I gave you too much good advice at a very young age," she said. Lily put a puzzle piece in the wrong spot, pulled it back out. "You gave me exactly the right amount," she said. "Savannah called on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after that. She sounded different, not in a damaged way, in the way that things sound different after they've been through something and come back to themselves but found themselves slightly rearranged. A little quieter, a little more deliberate. Like someone who has decided to spend their words more carefully because they understand now with their whole body, not just their mind, that words in time and presence are not unlimited resources. "I'm starting something," she said. "A program for women and kids in situations like mine, people who got caught in the middle of things they didn't choose. Resources, legal support, a way to get out if they need to get out." She paused. "I'm calling it the Clearwater Project, after the creek." Lily looked out the kitchen window. "The creek by the woods?" "Where you found me," Savannah said. "It feels right that it starts there." Another pause. "I wanted you to be the first person who wasn't Mason or my lawyer to know about it. I don't know exactly why. It felt important." "Because it started there," Lily said, "with you against that tree." Savannah was quiet for a moment. "Lily," she said, "can I ask you something I've been wanting to ask since that first day?" "Yes. Were you actually not scared? In the clearing, when you found me?" Lily thought about it. The real answer, not the easy one. "I was scared," she said. "My heart was going really fast. I didn't know if someone was going to come back. I didn't know what the chain meant or why you were there." She paused. "But being scared didn't seem like a good enough reason to leave. You were still there, so the fear was just something I had while I stayed. Savannah didn't say anything for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully level in the way of a person choosing precision over expression. That is the most honest definition of courage I have ever heard, she said. And I have been around some very brave people for a very long time. Lily looked at the puzzle she'd finished last night, completed finally, sitting on the corner of the table, waiting to be taken apart and put back in its box. My grandma says courage isn't the absence of fear, she said. It's just deciding the other thing matters more. She's right, Savannah said. She's completely right. A breath. Tell her I said so. She's right here, Lily said. Across the table, Ruth looked up from the newspaper with an expression that said she'd been listening the whole time and wasn't even slightly apologetic about it. The federal case moved through the system with the speed that federal cases move when 4 arrests come with solid physical evidence, and at least one of the arrested parties decides very quickly that cooperation is the smarter strategy. Walsh briefed Ruth twice more in the weeks that followed. Harlan Dell's cooperation was not immediate, but it was thorough, and what it produced was a map, a network that stretched 3 counties wide and had been operating for just over 4 years, using the particular quietness of small towns as cover, relying on the fact that nobody looked too hard at places that seemed too ordinary to warrant looking. Dell had been recruiting people from inside the infrastructure of those ordinary places. Code enforcement officers, one county clerk, a dispatcher in a neighboring department who had been feeding information about patrol schedules for 2 years. Carl Reyes, the 14-month deputy who had looked at the wrong trees, turned out to be Dell's nephew. Not by blood, by the kind of adoption that happens informally in communities, when a man takes a young person under his arm and shapes what they become. Dell had spent 8 years making Carl Reyes exactly what he needed him to be, and Carl Reyes had spent those years not understanding fully what he was becoming until the FBI showed him the documents and he sat in that room and stopped being able to look anyone in the eye. Walsh told Ruth this. Ruth told Lily only the parts that needed telling, which was most of it, because Ruth had decided a long time ago that protecting children from hard truths was not the same as preparing them for the world. He was tricked, Lily said about Reyes. He was shaped, Ruth said, over a long time, by someone he trusted. She paused. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it explains the difference between him and Dell. What's the difference? Dell knew, Ruth said. Every step of the way, he knew. Reyes started knowing, and then found ways not to. She looked at Lily. One of those is evil, the other is weakness. They're both dangerous, but they're not the same thing. Lily thought about that for a long time. The thing that nobody anticipated happened on a Wednesday in October, 8 weeks after the arrests, and it came not from the federal case or Walsh or Mason Cole or anyone Lily had spoken to directly. It came from the school. A girl in Lily's class named Priya had an older sister who was 17, and the 17-year-old had been approached twice in the last month by a man she didn't know who kept appearing in places he shouldn't logically be. Not threatening, not aggressive, just present. Consistently present in a way that had no innocent explanation. Priya had told her parents, and her parents had called the school, and the school, because it was the kind of school that had been paying close attention to a certain story about a certain student for the past 2 months, had called Walsh before they called anyone else. Walsh called Ruth. Ruth told Lily. Lily looked at her grandmother across the kitchen table and felt something settle in her chest. Not dread, not exactly, but a kind of sharp attention, the feeling of something incomplete that had suddenly shown itself. The network, Lily said. Walsh said there were people connected to it who were still running. Yes, Ruth said, and they know about me. Ruth's jaw tightened. Walsh doesn't believe Priya's situation is connected to you specifically. She thinks it may be a remnant operation, Someone working independently now that the central structure is gone, who is still in the area. But she's not sure. She's not sure, Ruth said. Lily stood up. She went to the drawer where her phone charged at night, and she picked it up. "What are you doing?" Ruth asked. "Calling Mason," Lily said. Ruth looked at her. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, "Walsh may not want—" "Walsh doesn't know everything I know," Lily said. "And Mason has people who know how to find things that aren't on official record." She looked at her grandmother. "You know I'm right." Ruth pressed her lips together. "I know you're right," she said, in the tone of a woman who wishes she didn't. "Make the call." Mason answered on the second ring. Same as always. Lily told him about Priya's sister. She told him the locations, the places the man had appeared, the timing, the pattern. She told him what Ruth had said about a remnant operation. Mason was quiet for 10 seconds. Then he said, "Give me a name and a description." 17-year-old girl, west side of Pine Creek, Lincoln High, walks home Tuesdays and Thursdays. She gave him the street. The man? Lily relayed what Walsh had told Ruth. Approximate age, medium build, dark jacket, a truck she described as older, two-tone, primer gray on the hood. Mason said, "Give me 48 hours. "Okay," Lily said. "And Lily," his voice shifted, just slightly, something in it that wasn't purely tactical. "You called me before you tried to handle it yourself. You said I could call whenever." "I did," he said. "I'm glad you believed me." She hung up. 31 hours later, Walsh called Ruth's phone at 7 in the morning. One arrest. A man named Terrence Gilby, 43, with a record that made Walsh's voice go flat and factual, the way it did when she was controlling her reaction to something that made her genuinely furious. He had been picked up at a truck stop on Route 9, 40 miles from Pine Creek, by two of Mason's people who had located him through methods Walsh said she preferred not to examine too closely, but which had produced the right result. He was in federal custody before 9 a.m. Priya's sister was safe. Had always been safe. Gilby had not gotten close enough to act. But close enough was its own category of terrifying, and Walsh said the family had been notified and was shaken and grateful, and the sister had cried for an hour and then said she wanted to know the name of the girl who made the call. Walsh didn't give it. She said that was for Lily to decide. Lily thought about it for one afternoon. Then she asked Walsh to tell Priya's sister that her name was Lily and that she lived 6 blocks away, and that she was in 3rd grade at Pine Creek Elementary, and that if the girl wanted to talk to someone who understood what it felt like to be scared and to have someone show up anyway, she knew where to find her. 2 days later, a 17-year-old named Mira knocked on the front door. Ruth answered it. She looked at the girl, tall, dark hair, eyes that had the particular quality of someone who has recently been very frightened and is now standing on the other side of it and not entirely sure what to do with where they are. "Is Lily home?" Mira asked. "She is," Ruth said, and she opened the door the rest of the way. Mira stayed for 2 hours. She and Lily sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Carver had held his coffee, and Walsh had opened her folder and Savannah's letter had been read 3 times, and they talked. Not about the case, not about Gilby, not about any of the machinery of what had happened. They talked about Priya, who was Lily's friend and Mira's little sister, and who apparently talked about Lily constantly in a way that Mira said was extremely sincere and only slightly annoying. They talked about the drawing Carver's daughter had sent, which Lily showed her, still in its envelope on the counter, where Lily kept it so she could see it without having to go looking. They talked about fear, what it felt like, what you did with it, whether it got smaller over time or just changed shape. Mira said, "I keep thinking I should have done something sooner, told someone sooner. I told my parents after the second time, but the first time I went home and I didn't say anything. And I keep thinking that if the first time had been—" "You told them," Lily said. "That's what matters." But the second time, you told them, Lily said again, flat and steady, the way her grandmother said the things that needed to stay said. Mira, you told them. That's the hard part. That's the whole thing. Mira looked at her. 17 years old, 6 inches taller, looking at an 8-year-old the way people kept looking at Lily, with that expression that was trying to reconcile the size of the person with the size of what they were saying. How are you so calm about everything? Mira asked. Lily thought about it. I'm not always calm, she said. I was scared in the woods. I was scared on the phone with the man I didn't know. I was scared when that car drove past our house twice in the dark. She looked at the drawing on the counter. But my grandma says you don't have to be calm to be steady. Calm is about your feelings. Steady is about what you do anyway. Mira looked at her for a long moment. Your grandmother, she said slowly, sounds like someone I need to talk to. She's in the garden, Lily said. She always is at this hour. Just go out the back door. Mira went. Lily heard the back door open and close, and then, a minute later, the sound of Ruth's voice from the garden, low and even and unhurried, the voice Ruth used when she was talking to someone who needed to be talked to without pressure, without agenda, without anything except the particular reassurance of being in the presence of someone who has seen enough to know that this moment is hard, and that hard moments end. Lily sat at the kitchen table alone. She looked at the vest hanging on the hook by the back door where Ruth had put it the first night, in the absent-minded way you hang things you expect to need again soon. The leather had softened fractionally from handling. She picked it up most evenings, held it the way Carver's daughter had drawn her holding things, like the weight of something was what made it real. She thought about Savannah against the tree. She thought about Walsh's tires on the gravel. She thought about Mason's whistle, clean and carrying, 700 people moving as one. She thought about Carver's hands around a coffee mug and the 11 words on his phone screen that had cost 2 years to earn. She thought about Mira's voice saying, I should have done something sooner, and how those words were the bravest kind of wrong a person could be, because they came from a person who actually cared. She thought about Biscuit, who had started all of it by being a dog who didn't come home when called, which was exactly the kind of beginning that most important things had. Not a plan, not an intention, just a small, ordinary absence that pulled a person in a direction they hadn't chosen and didn't know would matter. The back door opened. Mira came back in with pink in her cheeks and something lighter in her face, the specific lightness that comes after a conversation with Ruth Morgan, who had been dispensing that particular kind of lightness for 67 years and showed no signs of stopping. She's amazing, Mira said. I know, Lily said. She told me to come back Thursday. She tells everyone that, Lily said. She means it every time. Mira picked up her bag from the chair. She paused at the door. My sister talks about you like you're a superhero, she said. I wanted to come here and tell you you're just a kid so she'd stop building you up into something impossible. She looked at Lily steadily. But I'm not going to tell her that. I am just a kid, Lily said. Yeah, Mira said. I know. That's the part I can't figure out how to explain to her. She opened the door. See you around, Lily. See you Thursday, Lily said. Ruth means it. Mira smiled. Went. That evening, Lily sat on the porch with Biscuit in her lap, and the vest folded on the step beside her, while the sun went down behind the tree line on the west side of town. Ruth brought out 2 glasses of lemonade and sat in the other chair, and they watched the light change the way they did on the good evenings, without speaking, without needing to, the particular comfort of shared silence between people who have nothing left to prove to each other. After a while, Ruth said, Walsh called while you were with Mira. The FBI confirmed the full scope of the network today. 18 arrests total across 3 counties. Every case connected to the garage, to Dell, to Gilby. She paused. 11 families reunited. Lily looked at the tree line. 11, she said. 11, Ruth confirmed. Biscuit shifted in her lap, resettled, sighed the profound sigh of a dog who has decided this is exactly where he needs to be. Lily picked up the vest from the step. She ran her thumb along the stitching of the patch. White background, red letters, the way she'd been doing since the morning Savannah put it on her shoulders. It was starting to feel less like something that had been given to her and more like something that had always been hers. The way certain things are yours not because you acquired them, but because they fit the shape of who you already were. She thought about the word on the patch, what it meant to the people who wore it, what it meant now, on a step in Pine Creek, in the hands of an 8-year-old who had walked into the woods looking for a dog and found something that turned out to be much heavier and much more necessary than a dog. She thought about courage, the absence of fear kind that she didn't have and had never claimed, and the other kind, the real kind, the kind that is just deciding in the specific moment when it costs something that the other thing matters more. She had gone into those woods afraid. She had sat on that dirt afraid. She had made those calls afraid. Every single time she had been exactly as afraid as the situation called for. And every single time she had done the thing anyway. Not because the fear left, but because she had learned. From Ruth, from a grandmother who ran church rummage sales and opened her door to strangers, and told hard truths to children because she loved them enough not to lie. That fear and action were not opposites, that you could hold both at the same time, that you were supposed to. The last of the sun pulled back behind the pines. Ruth reached over and squeezed her hand once, just once, then let go. Lily looked at the vest in her hands, at the patch, at the letters that had meant something to 700 people who rode all the way to Pine Creek to say thank you to a child who had done what most adults talked themselves out of. She hadn't saved Savannah because she was brave. She had saved Savannah because she was there, and being there meant she was the one who had to decide, and she had decided. That was all. That was everything. She folded the vest carefully and set it on her lap and put her hand flat on top of it and looked at the darkening sky above the tree line of the woods, where all of it had begun, and she understood, with the quiet, unshakable certainty of a person who has stopped needing to be told what is true, that bravery was not a thing you had. It was a thing you did. One ordinary, terrifying moment at a time, for as long as the world kept asking. And the world, she knew now, would always keep asking. The answer was always going to be up to her.